Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Glory to you, Lord. When the days were completed for their purification according to the law of Moses, the parents of Jesus took him up to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. Just as it is written in the law of the Lord, every male that opens the womb shall be consecrated to the Lord, and to offer the sacrifice of a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, in accordance with the dictate of the law of the Lord. Now, there was a man in Jerusalem whose name was Simeon. This man was righteous and devout, awaiting the consolation of Israel, and the Holy Spirit was upon him. It had been revealed to him by the Holy Spirit that he should not see death before he had seen the Christ of the Lord. He came in the Spirit into the temple, and when the parents brought in the child Jesus to perform the custom of the law in regard to him, he took him into his arms and blessed God, saying, "Now, Master, you may let your servant go in peace according to your word. For my eyes have seen your salvation, which you prepared in sight of all the peoples, a light for revelation to the Gentiles, and glory for your people Israel." The child's father and mother were amazed at what was said about him. And Simeon blessed them and said to Mary, his mother, "Behold, this child is destined for the fall and rise of many in Israel, and to be a sign that will be contradicted. And you yourself a sword will pierce, so that the thoughts of many hearts may be revealed." There was also a prophetess, Anna, the daughter of Phanuel of the tribe of Asher. She was advanced in years, having lived 7 years with her husband after her marriage, and then as a widow until she was 84. She never left the temple, but worshipped night and day with fasting and prayer, and coming forward at that very time, she gave thanks to God and spoke about the child to all who were awaiting the redemption of Jerusalem. When they had fulfilled all the prescriptions of the law of the Lord, they returned to Galilee, to their own town of Nazareth. The child grew and became strong, filled with wisdom, and the favor of God was upon him. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Story. Mary Stomes, who is the editor of This Day, which is a little missalette that has all the readings and the mass parts for people to use in their daily coming to Mass or on Sunday coming to Mass, tells the story of how she and her 3 children and her husband spent a particular Christmas Eve. It's a very long story. I'll shorten it, as hard as you may find that to believe. The 3 children, their mother and dad, on a Christmas Eve were going to do in the following order: shopping, Mass, and then dinner. Christmas Eve, a tradition. This particular Christmas Eve, Mary noted that the priest celebrating Mass happened to be a classmate of hers. After Mass, they talk to Father. She tells them about the tradition and about the fact that they have already done the shopping, that they have indeed been to Mass, and now they are going to dinner. And he says, "May I come along?" Of course. Off they go. As they order, everything is wonderful. Conversations going back and forth. Suddenly, as the food is coming, it dawns on Mom that while they say prayers at their home before meals, they do not do that in restaurants. But after all, there's a priest at the table. So she says, "What do you say we say a prayer?" And I would bet from her eldest comes the retort, "In a restaurant? Get real." It's not the answer you want when you are a mother and there's a priest at the table, even in a restaurant. But is that reaction human or what? Human. Now, we might say that will never be a holy family. And I would say we oftentimes make too much of the Holy Family and how one gets to be that. In the scriptures today, we heard St. Luke tell us, when the days were completed for their purification according to the law of Moses, they took him up to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. The key there, I believe, is that they were going to the temple because the law of God asked them to do that. Mary and Joseph were a holy family, or we call them that now. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, the Holy Family. And we all think nobody could be like that. But here they are, a young couple. Remember, Mary is very young. A young couple bringing their child to the temple. Why? Because the law of God asks for that. Holy or ordinary, but also aware of the great gift of the law of Torah? I would say the latter. And then the gospel notes that the two of them offered a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons in accordance with the dictate of the law of the Lord. What does that mean? Well, there were offerings you made at the temple if you were well-to-do, and there were offerings you made at the temple if you couldn't afford very much. Mary and Joseph fell into the latter category. 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons would be offered at the altar in the name of this child who was opening, the male child who opened the womb of Mary and therefore was to be presented. Always true in the Jewish law. There again, is this a holy couple? Or is this a couple who know what they need to do in order to live a good life together, a holy life? I would say the latter. So what are we learning here? It seems to me that we often think to ourselves, we can't be a holy family. I will admit, I've never thought of my family as being a holy family. But when I think about what is important here, that we do what is important in our lives because we know God is asking us to do that, then I think to myself, well, maybe. You know, my mom and dad were, quote, religious about going to Mass. You didn't dare do anything in our house before you did Mass. Even on Christmas Day, no gift could ever be opened until we had all been to Mass. That was great when we were little kids, but when my sister got to be a teenager and had those snoozy days, you could be at 12 and 1 o'clock before you got around to the gifts. She had late Mass. The rest of us all went to the 7. Were we a holy family? I don't know. I think we were. At least it turned out one priest. Not bad. But the key here is not turning out priests, although that's a good idea. What is important is my folks lived their lives trying to do what God asked them to do. But they lived beyond that, what I would call ordinary lives. Daddy went to work. My mother took care of the house. They made it all happen and come together. But they always had God in mind. And I think the same thing is true for most of us. And we are, more than we recognize, holy families. Why? Because we are doing the ordinary things that God asks us to do. We get married. Sometimes you might wonder to yourself, however did I find him or her? You don't know. But it happened. Somewhere, sometime, somebody walked by you and you thought, wow. Right? And you pursued that somebody. And then you were being married. Right? And I would say most of us probably decided, you know what? I better go to church for this wedding. Right? And if we do, then that wedding will be blessed. Witnessed by whom? By one of the designees of the church. And then we started having children. Right? One of them just was in our midst and reminded us of children. That's what life is about. The children grow up, right? Basketball teams. But as they grow up, who guides them? We do. Mom and dad guide these children as they grow, and they try to instill in them precepts of the church. They try to remind them of who God is. Maybe they don't say prayers in a restaurant, but they say prayers at home. Or they say prayers both at home and in the restaurant. Why? Because it's required? No. Because they think about God in their lives. And as that family grows together and grows in their awareness of one another, they become a holy family. Why? Because they are living according to their own awareness of God's presence in their lives, and they are also doing what they can to follow the directions of their church, our church. It's not, you got to do this, you got to do that. No, that was so very clear in the gospel today. It's not a matter of you got to do this, you got to do that. It is, this is the law of Torah, and we follow its tradition. When children come, they are usually baptized, are they not? Right? Why? It's just an awareness of God's presence in our lives. And because we are aware of God, we think this child needs to be dedicated to God. And so we bring them to the church to be baptized. Why? Because somebody beat you up with a cord in order to make you follow the law? No. No. Because we know inside ourselves that this dedication to God is important and necessary. And when we do those things, we are becoming a holy family. So today, while we honor Mary and Joseph and Jesus, we need to keep in mind what happened to them. It's right at the end of the gospel today. And St. Luke tells us, when they had fulfilled all the prescriptions of the law of the Lord, they returned to Galilee, to their own town of Nazareth. The child grew and became strong, filled with wisdom, and the favor of God was upon him. They just did the ordinary things extraordinarily well, and they were a holy family who listened to God and had God in their midst.